that's the course for today. And you'll see session 1.1 is an introduction to what we're calling the SCRUM technique. That's Gerard and I at least are calling it. Nobody else is calling it that yet. 3 sessions today, a short break in between. Each part of a session should be 10 minutes, roughly. So 5 times 10 equals 50 and a 10-minute break. So that's the way it works. And the final session, team exercise, you take as long as you take, but we will definitely be finished by 12. So that's what it's all about. And if we go on to session 1 and that first point, the SCRUM technique. What do I mean by SCRUM technique? Well, it's actually the shape. There's the shape. Imagine that as the scrum, even if you don't play rugby. The reason we need this technique is because this is an example of in-person training, which is important because team building, yes, you have a presence, you get to know people, you can ask proper questions. And I put pluses and minuses. The minus, the big 2 minuses really. Number 1 is we need a room, and it's really difficult finding the right size room in Bromley, as Gerard has found out. And the second one is the travel. You've all had to come here, give up your valuable time. And that's not very green, is it? However, compared with the alternative, which is online, what do we know? Well, yes, it's very green. People could do it in their own time. But I'm looking as an educationalist at the outcome, the learning outcome. And what we've found, and certainly at the University of Cumbria, where I teach, incidentally, it's the occupational therapy course, the master's course there, what we found is the students who do it online aren't listening. They're distracted, they're doing other things. You might have 20 of them on the screen there, and a couple of screens go off. What does it mean? Well, they say, oh, bandwidth issues, had to switch off the camera. No, I wanted something else to do. And I was in Birmingham yesterday, and one of the local authorities there was telling us that during their most recent online training, one of the people left, the laptop was in the kitchen, she forgot to switch the camera off, and there she was making spaghetti bolognese for the family lunch. And of course she was asked afterwards what was going on, and she said, oh, I knew it all. Well, some students suggest that they know it all, but when it comes to the exams, I'm afraid their outcomes, lots failed. The scores were much lower. So online is really not a good way to really learn things. So hybrid SCRUM is a combination, if you like. We call it a modified one. So what it consists of is, number 1, as before, you prepare a slide deck, a PowerPoint slide deck, right? That's what you're looking at now, a slide deck. Number 2, you need the space, so we set this all up in this horseshoe arrangement. Number 3, we've set up the cameras. And there are cameras, they're mainly looking at me, I guess, but they'll see some of you in them. That's just to show this is really a proper session with real people. So if you want to laugh, shout, cry, that's real emotion. Not too much of the crying, I hope, but that's what we do. Invite your audience, and you can actually stream this in principle. Now, we can't stream it here in Bromley for various reasons, one of which is this place is it going to be knocked down, Gerard, or is it just going to be relocated somewhere? But they're not going to invest in all that sort of. You stream funerals at the crematorium, so why can't you stream training? Well, that's the future. You will be able to, but let's assume that there's nobody watching it live. So you take all the feeds, you edit them, post-production stuff, which is what Ben's going to be doing, and then you produce it as a YouTube video, which you can share at any time, and you can go back to it and watch it. And the good thing about YouTube is it allows analytics, so Gerard can find out how long you spent looking at a 1-hour session. The average apparently is about 1/3 of the time. So you're not watching. If you only spend 1/3 of the time and you're flicking through, you're not really taking part. So that's what we think it is. We think the outcomes will be better. It's certainly going to be there forever. I think we probably put this, Bromley don't mind sharing the training with the world. It promotes Bromley as the first, and it is the first ever to have a social care event of this type. So that's the technique. Are you all happy with that? I mean, if there's somebody who, who really doesn't want to be seen on Police 5 or anything, and they want their image edited out of it or pixelated over, that can be done. But, probably needs a pretty good excuse why you don't want that to happen. But, Gerard doesn't want that to happen. No.
Take me off it. The idea is the next stage is to create a resource for everybody working across all the organisations within Bromley. So we have a private and we've developed a public SharePoint for everybody in adult social care with the council. But now we want to sort of take it to that step forward where there'll be thumbnails and there'll be like an online resource where everybody can use it both as professionals but also in the future for our residents and our clients in the community. And one of the biggest barriers that we've encountered is data sharing and how we share resources across from the healthcare, voluntary sector, from King's. And so this is the next step, is to say we actually want to create this page of resources on our Bromley website. So this is the first big step towards that.
Great. And things like YouTube. You all look at YouTube, don't you? Any of you got your own channel? Hey, my granddaughter does, doesn't she? She's 9. You can do it straight from your phone. So really and truly, this is the learning method of the future. So we've got to be up with it. Okay, this is the assessment training. The whole idea was that the awareness training was done 2 years ago online. So if you actually attended or subsequently watched it, great. The reality is what we've learned is that people didn't take that much attention. So we're going to review very, very quickly what was done. That was the program that we used. I'm going to give it the quick one. Assistive technology, generally 4 pillars. On the top left, adaptations to the home. On the right, that's fixed. On the right, portable devices, things you can carry with you, obviously small things, mainly walking sticks, things of that type. Electronic and functional devices, and then the final one is connected AT. And the important thing of having it in that arrangement is that if we drew a line across the horizontal, then what you have is anything above the line is effectively mechanical and something from the 20th century. If it's below, it's electronic, changing all the time. So quite clever stuff, smart stuff. I could draw the line the other way. Things to the right, quick to provide. So essentially, if you're in hospital and you want to come home tomorrow, that should be possible to have that assistive technology installed this afternoon. That would be your job, I think. Right, anything on the left, slow to provide because it's personalised specifically for you. It may be made to measure. So if we're, well, forget the stuff at the top perhaps, the functional stuff includes sensory. So that's a sensory AT of the future.
It can read text, any printed text, wherever you are, on any surface, or can my eye will be able to read it. So if it's a book at home in the evening, if it's a newspaper in the morning, if it's the documents that come across your desk at work, but Orcam My Eye can do a lot more than just read text. It'll recognize also the faces of people around you. You can teach it to recognize products. It'll identify barcodes. It'll be able to tell you the color of objects, identify banknotes, and much more.
My grandson is blind, has been since birth. He goes to a school in Liverpool, and they use Orcam there. They've been trialling them. Ultimately, it's something individuals have to buy. Few local authorities can afford. It's £3,000 typically. But that's the way assistive technology going, direct payments, personal budgets, all new mechanisms for people to have what they need. This is a lower cost item.
For good teamwork, communication is key. But with all these noises blending together, I can't understand what she's saying.
Catching up with friends is great, but when they all talk at once, I just feel left out. Meet the Voice Selector Converse, built to cut through the background noise. Easy to use. It tracks the main speaker and softens the rest.
This brown one, which is also soft, but it's silk.
The voice selector follows the conversation automatically, so you can effortlessly stay tuned in. With a compact design, use it wherever you go. Now you can catch every moment.
Gerard wants to know who scored. So that's a device. How much do you think that's worth? Or how much does it cost? Not the same as what's it worth. Is it in the tens of pounds, hundreds of pounds, or thousands of pounds? Under 100. So we'll be introducing that later on when I introduce your packs of product cards. Okay, so the one really important for today is connected. That's communication. That's what used to be called telecare alarms and is now called tech, and in the future will be called something else as well. So we're moving forward to a new era of, and you need to understand what's in it. I've drawn it bigger to show this is taking over the whole world of AT. And it's a bigger and bigger part of an occupational therapist's role. Benefits of technology-enabled care, depends who you choose. Great benefits for each group, whether it's the individual, their carers, for social care, obviously where you're coming from housing providers, and from the health economy. It benefits them all, but only if it's the right fit. So that's the purpose of today. Do we manage to match the product with the individual? So just to review, in case any of you don't know what a social alarm is, a 20th century, a long time ago, analog solution. I was just looking around. Sometimes in the audience you find someone who wasn't alive in the 20th century. That makes me feel old, but it means these boxes, and you've got them. How many, Gerard? Over 1,000 in Bromley. They are old and actually stigmatizing as well. Pull cord. What's this for? If a child sees that, they pull it anyway, don't they? What's it for? The way it works, it talks to one of these devices, and there's lots of different ones, all sorts of grey or beige, and they communicate over the old telephone network to a 24-hour monitoring centre, where they try and decide what to do. And the usual solution is to call a relative or call 999, or in Bromley, they've been calling a team. I'm not sure where the gap between 999 and the team comes in. This is an ongoing debate across the country. But one thing we know for sure is that they're not used very well, effectively. In fact, if we did a survey of 100 people today in Bromley and said, where is your alarm pendant? What would be the top answer? Yeah, bedside drawer. And that's the same throughout the country, except Liverpool, where the top answer was around the Madonna statue. But that's a Scouse thing. So how it worked, yeah, in principle, it should be great. There she is, there's Mrs. Smith. She runs in and she falls over. But no worries, she's actually wearing an alarm pendant. Automatic fall detector sends a message through to the monitoring centre, which is currently miles away, isn't it, in Blackburn or somewhere? Yeah. And they say, are you all right, Mrs. Smith? And she said, well, no, I can't get up. I'm on the floor. And they said, no worries, we'll send someone to pick you up. And that's how the system has worked for 20, 30 years. And it should be okay, but not everyone lives alone, and not everyone falls in the house. What happens if they fall outside somewhere and the system doesn't work, which is one of the limitations of that old system. The other limitation, it relies on this response team, and not all elements are in position, and the protocols are also not that well established. There needs to be a different protocol for someone who's flooded the house compared to someone who's got a house fire, or someone who's wandered away from the property, or if they've had a fall. So part of that escalation procedure is simply asking the question, okay, you've fallen, are you okay? I don't know. Are you on the floor? Yes. Can you get up? No. Well, you know someone needs to help, whether it's the ambulance or whether it's a responder. There are lots of applications, a spectrum of applications here. All of these should be enabled, but I'm afraid, like so many other local authorities across England and Wales, there's very few of these that are currently part of your offer. They could all be part of it. They could all be relevant, but it does need a service transformation to move away from that very simple telecare alarm bit to include all the other possibilities, including reminders, self-care, helping people to help themselves. All that is part of what we can do and perhaps what we should be doing, because if we get this right, when we're old enough to need them, they'll be in position. So it's for our own benefit. Anybody got an O level in Greek? No, neither have I. Latin? No, but they give the name to every... I'm old enough to have one in Latin. Plesio care is Greek. Tele means distance, so telescope, you're looking at things far off. Television, it's coming to you from far off. Plesio means close. So plesio care means care that is close at hand. And what that really means, it's anyone who doesn't live alone, they may well have a carer living with them. That's particularly the case in learning disability, for example. So learning disability doesn't generally need telecare, it needs plesio care. Have you got plesio care in Bromley?
Aspects of it.
Aspects, okay. Yeah, well, Care Assist is the 20th century version. Okay, so you know, that's all going to have to be dumped because everything's going. But yes, the same principles, absolutely the same principles. So example of a 21st century one would be, looks like a phone, but it works in the same way, accepts messages that someone maybe has had an epileptic seizure or maybe the bed is wet. The last thing you want in those cases, I mean, it doesn't sound bonkers, you'd send a message through a telephone system to Blackburn, and Blackburn would ring someone who's in the next room to tell them what's going on. That is not efficient, but across the country, that is what's been happening. We need to be cleverer in this and start using that. M-Care, M stands for mobile. Great, plesio care, telecare, work in the house. M-Care works anywhere. Because we want to promote independence. Independence means actually getting out of that house and enjoying yourself. Simple ones, own phone. This is a device which has pictures or maybe just 3 or 4 separate numbers on it. So it's as simple as possible. So you could have one with the Bromley Care Link, you could have one with 999 on it, and anyone else like your reablement team or something could be a third number. We had one for my dad. He's not with us any longer. It saved him several times. We just had the 4 numbers of my brother, myself, my sister, and 999 there. Which of those was I, do you think? Bearing in mind, I didn't really like the idea of having to go out 3 o'clock in the morning because he needed to be picked up. So where would you put my number? First, second, third, or fourth? Pardon?
I bet you were the first.
No, I wasn't. My brother was the first. Psychology tells you people don't press the second and third. They go for the top or the bottom. So it saved him 3 times. He fell in the night. My brother went there. And so really simple things. Have you got them yet, Gerard? Have you got a few there? Yes, you have? In place, yes. You've installed them. I say installed. And that's the great thing. Installation is literally hang this round your neck or put it in your bag. It doesn't need that complicated connection because it's direct. And as long as there's a mobile signal on it, it finds the... You do. And I'm sorry?
How much is one of those?
About £100. You've got a deal. You know, Gerard will have really squeezed them. He'll have squeezed them.
Squeeze every company.
Yeah, he'll have squeezed them and got them for about 75, 80. But private individuals buy them. There's airtime as well, of course. There's a SIM card in it. And that's the thing we're going to learn about digital. You buy it, and then there's a subscription. So you have to balance those two. But that's just my first example. That's another one. That's an Oyster. The latest of those is the Oyster Rio. You've got some of those, haven't you? Yes. Great. That's a watch built in. What's the problem with having everything on a watch?
You don't wear it all the time?
Well, yes and no. I wear my Fitbit watch all the time because the battery lasts 5 to 7 days. But if you're an alarm one like that, anyone got an Apple Watch? Yes? Yeah. How long does the battery last? Not too long. Less than a day. So actually at night people generally put it on side to charge, which is when you might take a fall on the way to the bathroom. So there are issues, but they're available and there are lots of them. And that's another simple, cheap and cheerful one. Have you used that, Gerard? It's actually, it's one of my favourites. Comes in lots of different colours. You can either attach it to your keyring, and it's that small. And it's something we got for my daughter's mother-in-law, because she'd had a stroke and we were away. So all of these things, or some of them at least, they're even cleverer than just sending an alarm, because they got built-in fall detection. Not terribly clever. I call it impact detection. And if you ask a salesman to demonstrate, they drop it on the floor. That's not like a fall, that's an impact. Apple Watch actually designed to detect a car crash. Not the same as a fall, but you can see the technology is there to do these things. The top right one, which that one, that does exactly the same as these. It's got a SIM card in it. It's got an automatic detection. It's got GPS. And in terms of price again, because clearly that was going to be the next question, just over £100 and a subscription, of course. So moving in that direction, whichever one, and the whole idea is there'll be choice. This is aesthetics. We're reaching a place where people can choose. You know, I wouldn't want the pink one, and depending on which football team you support, you may not want the red one either. So it's choice, individualization, and that must be part of the trend. Then there's smartphones. I guarantee everyone in this room has a smartphone. I can remember 5, 6 years ago, it was about 50-50. And then they were sometimes ashamed because it was still a BlackBerry or something from 2010. Well, you've all got them. Okay, maybe nobody's got a flip phone, have you?
My friend has.
You have?
No, I haven't.
No, you haven't. The new Google Pixel one's out yesterday, I think. So interesting. That's an iPhone 13, maybe. Any of you got an iPhone? Just a couple of you, the iPhone. What number? 13. Okay. And what comes next? 15? 14? Is 14 out yet? It is out. Okay, there's 15 in October then. What's the difference between them? Very little. You're obviously so rich you could afford to spend £1,000 each go. Okay, that's your choice, you know. What do you drive? Anybody drive a Rolls Royce? No. Same choice. If you can afford it, or a Tesla, if you can afford it, buy it. If you can't, you've got to be more sensible. Maybe you just need to be more sensible. Anyway, the great features about all of these things is all of that's built in. You know, even the lowest quality Chinese Android phone from 5 years ago. It's got all of those things. And what really matters, perhaps, from our perspective of assessment is the MK apps. How many apps have you got on your phones? Any got more than 50? Anyone? Bet you have. You just don't admit it. I made them count last time. Someone had 68, and they didn't know what half of them were for. Yeah, so, but having the right ones matters because they're health and well-being ones. Personal ones, nothing that's going to share the data with the world. Things for you to control your diabetes, give up smoking. For someone who has hearing problems, you can do your own hearing test. And then the smartphone becomes your hearing aid because it's now personalized to your needs. For someone who's blind, there's a Be My Eyes app. Any of you volunteers for Be My Eyes? I'm a volunteer. Sometimes I get a call, and it's just a picture of a shop window, and someone wants to know what I think of that cardigan, the colour and things like that. So that's a Be My Eyes app, free app. So all of that's good stuff, and it was all in our course 2 years ago. which you've all managed to forget. True? Okay, just as well I went over it. So we start again on assessment. It's about the transformation of the system, the digital transformation. Where do we start? Well, what is analog? What is digital? There we are. That's a clock. I've shown that clock to my 9-year-old granddaughter and my 5-year-old granddaughter. They cannot tell what time it is. They don't know, never been taught. Whereas if you show them that clock, they instantly say 10:12. And the chances are that this one's slow anyway, so it's probably the same time, but they don't know. And they can't tell that actually you just need to move that finger forward a bit and you get the same as that. Part of the transformation is that it encourages data. In this case, it's the time. There's a user interface. That matters. Do you need it brighter, dimmer? What colour would you like it to be? And you can add, in a clock radio, you have all those other features built in. So that's one of the advantages of digital. And it comes in different forms, and there's a smart speaker, and it links to the internet and can do all sorts of things. And it's how some people actually wake up in the morning. Don't worry. Seat there. It's, you haven't missed anything. Not much, don't worry. Okay, so this is the smart world, and it's everywhere around us. And in our awareness session, I actually went into all the different industries, from shopping to money, and how it's changed because of digital. So I'll leave you just one more here then. That's a Worcester boiler. It's gas run, so therefore it'll be redundant in 20, wherever the government decides we've got to do away with these things. It produces hot water comes out of the tap, also goes to radiators, and I say, any of you remember those things in school? Don't need to hear, just look, they're there. Radiators from the 1950s, but they still work. Not very efficiently, but they work, and hopefully on the wall somewhere there'll be a dial like that you turn. That's an analog thermostat. You dial it. We want the temperature to be something comfortable, about 20, 21. So we'd set that up, and if we were lucky, it got there. So the first part of digitalization is that we changed it to a wireless digital one, a thermostat. That's the type you've probably got in your houses today. That means it's communicating with our boiler. So we've got some measure of control. And now we move to a smart hive, or any of you got a smart thermostat where you can control it with an app, and so it's nice and warm when you get home. Yep, modern way of doing things. And of course, if it's communicating, then you might as well also communicate with everything else. So once upon a time, we had these meters, and a little man in a van used to come and read it, and you were never in, so they estimated, and it was always the wrong way, and you ended up with a big bill. And today you swap those over for, well, they're smarter. I don't think they're that smart, but they're smarter, they're digital. So now, in principle, it can switch things on when the tariff is less during the night, and therefore save you money. That's the way it's supposed to work. Not so good, but it's the way digital transformation has gone, and nobody needs to come around and read the meters anymore. It's real time. So what about care? Can we transform that? Well, we should be. That's the old world of care. And dumb monitoring. It's just a box that sits there until you do something. They're fixed in the home, reactive. Unless something has happened, then it'll do nothing. Passive. There's nothing that the end user can do. Beige and functional. Ugly devices that we wouldn't have in our homes. Commission services, okay, you're going to get this because Bromley Council says you're going to get it. Expensive to buy and maintain. And if we wanted to buy one today, Jared, how much would we have to pay for a button and a box system?
Anything from 100,
200
200 quid.
quid minimum. For something which, in the days of electronics, we'd expect a button and a box. Everything we hold is electronic. Even I'm changing my slides over with a Bluetooth device. So we have to transform that. And we need to move to intelligent monitoring. We need platforms for data presentation. It's about showing us what's going on not telling someone occasionally in Blackburn that you've pressed a button twice in the last 2 years. We want preventative support. Can we stop this happening? Can we notice the fact that someone's slowing down or their eyesight's deteriorating and they're not going out? Can we do something about it before they actually have a fall? And then the other bits, mainstream consumer products, like our watches. They're mainstream. And that means they're lower cost and it's a retail model. So if you want to buy one, you go out and get one. I call it the Argos test. I used to call it the Amazon test, but actually Amazon will get you anything anywhere, whereas Argos is perhaps a better indicator of what's available on the high street. So does it pass the Argos test? Well, do community alarm systems, can you buy them in Argos? No, you can't. They were once for sale. A company actually manufactured them for BT. And they were for sale in the Argos catalogue for 3 months. How many do you think sold? 3 months. 8. So Argos require, over a 3-month period, they must sell over 8,000 in 3 months to maintain their space in their catalogue. So it went, but now I think it'll come back, but it won't come back in the same way. This is not going to be like for like. We're going to change the way we think about things. And this is helping us to do it because this is actually happening. Openreach are changing our systems from copper to fibre. It's all happening. It's happened. Our house has got it already. And many of you, I'm sure, have already had it. And the big deal is that the PSTN, the Public Switch Telephone Network, is being switched off in 2025. When's that? Ooh, about 30 months away. And what will then happen? Well, yeah, we'll all have faster internet. Things won't break down. Lightning strikes, don't worry, fibre. Copper, lightning strikes somewhere, everything goes down. And we'll have more bandwidth capability. We'll be able to download our Netflix films much quicker. All great benefits, of course. But with all benefits, there have to be something else. Negatives. Anyone know what that is? Facts. They'll be dead. Dead by 2025. No. Do we need them anyway? You can send an attachment as an email. It will be dead. So, will there be museum items? I don't know. There'll be some geeks who collect them, undoubtedly. That is a care phone system. Dead. Won't work. Wired telephone extensions. Old houses, that's how people... you had the connection in the hallway, so you wired up to the bedroom, maybe one to the kitchen. They won't work. They won't work because if you don't have copper, there's no power to run an extension. No worries, we can use DEC hands-free phones. That'll work anyway. Big problem, power cut. What happens? Well, internet goes off. If the whole thing is carried through an internet system, and that's what digital means, then how are we going to communicate? Go on, how are we going to do it? You don't look frightened, so you can't. There must be an easy solution. Use mobile instead. That's one way of doing it, except some places don't have a mobile reception, which is a bit of a problem. The other way around it is you buy one of these. And that's actually an adapter. It's a battery supply, which will keep your system running for about an hour. And significance of an hour, statistically, the average length of a power outage in the UK is 52 minutes. So an hour will cover most of them. Well, where I live, when power goes down in some of the outlying regions, it's down for days. So that's a real problem. So that, BT sell them about £80 ago. They say they will give them free, or no, they will make access for vulnerable people. Who's vulnerable? All of us at times. So they haven't defined who it is. So you might say there are 1.5, 2 million people who have telecare services. They must be vulnerable. BT were looking at more like 200,000. And anyway, they said, we don't offer all of them a service. There's Talk and all the others, and Virgin Fibre. If you buy one of these, what do you think's inside there? What are the batteries? These clever things. Answer, 3 AA batteries, rechargeable ones. That's all it is, £80. So the price of these will fall, they'll get better. So we'll find ways around this. So the point is that the negatives will be far less than the positives for these things. But otherwise, we're transforming, and I'll come back to this again in a moment, but the barriers to changing anything. And the first one is this lack of awareness. How many of you knew about this digital transformation and the switching off of the power? How many of you knew before today? Well, just a couple of you, eh? Just the clever ones. No, to look embarrassed. Training. Neither the users nor the staff have been trained in digital transformation. Then there's a culture change. We really are part of this big difference, partly wants and needs. What's the difference? You know, what people want isn't what they get. What they need is what we should be helping them with. Terminology, we're now looking at not simply their care needs, we're looking at increasing happiness, it's well-being. It's part 2, if you like, of the 2014 Care Act. And then there's a fear of technology. People are rightly scared that they'll break it and whatever. Well, you know, people used to break machines in factories 100 years ago, and they get sacked, and people would get killed because the machine had broken. What happens if you break your laptop today? What if you break your phone? What if you drop your phone and the screen smashes?
It's a disaster.
It is, but only for 24 hours, because you get a replacement. Hey, so we know how to deal with these things, so we mustn't be scared of it. And then the last one is the risk. We're doing things that are different, and there are other issues, including this one here, ethics and consent. We're dealing with vulnerable people. What's the ethics of suggesting that they have something which they're not familiar with and which they're unsure if they want or not? Should we use technology at all, therefore? Well, this is something that the medics have had to face a long time ago. I don't remember him, but apparently the Hippocratic Oath starts off with this. First thing you do, don't harm anyone. And we can have the same thing today. The principles, 4 principles, autonomy, give people choices. Second one is beneficence. That's the try and help people whenever you can. The opposite of that, of course, is non-maleficent, do no harm. And finally, this thing called justice. And this is give everyone a chance. And this is applied in learning disability more than anything else. Here's a technology, oh, don't give him a smartphone. Why not? Give him the chance. Because if he could use that, he could do so many other things. So the principles, I think, are simple, but in a digital world, it's far more complication. We're creating all this data, which has value. Yes, there are strengths, we can use it, but how much data? And it's stacks of it. We measure our phone contracts in data, don't we? How many gigabytes of data do you have per month? And if you run out, it's a disaster because you can't get online. Gigabytes. I can remember, years gone by, the guy I shared a laboratory with when I was doing my PhD, he was building his own computer. It was an Electron, it was called. And he had to wait till his next grant before he could buy another memory chip. 512 bytes. Half a kilobyte, not a megabyte, not a gigabyte. So that's what's happened. Data production, storage, transmission, escalated by orders of magnitude. And then it's going to be monitored. And the question is, do you give consent to your data being monitored by somebody else? Well, isn't that what a telecare system has always been? We've called what I would call the alarm receiving centre a monitoring centre. They don't monitor anything except the lines. They're monitoring, has this telephone been used? That's the monitoring bit. But now we're talking about putting far more equipment in. which is capable of measuring and monitoring. Security, if all that data is produced, where's it going? Is it safe? Passwords. Oh, how many layers of passwords and protection do you want? They get in the way, but without them, your security is compromised. And then access. Who looks at that data? Do you really want someone in America to know what you're doing? Do you want your family to know what you're doing? These are all private consent issues that we have to address. Okay, so we now move on the real business of assessment, and it's about all those things. Ambition, which people often forget. What do you want out of this? So the process, we need to know their personal circumstances. What options do we really have available to us? And then what it means is we need to know that person. How long do you take for an assessment? Hour? Hour and a half. Can you get to know a person in that time and their whole life? No, but there's limitations on your time as well. If you're going to come up with the right solution, you need to know all the technologies and any other options, because the other options are still there. And thirdly, and that's the hard one, you've got to match it in the most effective way, which could mean the lowest cost way, the least intrusive way, or the one that the individual actually likes. So that's the process. Back to my Latin. Assessment is Latin. It means to sit beside someone. And that's how you get to know them. So how do you do this over the telephone? With great difficulty. The whole process of discharge to assess, you know, you've guessed about it. They tell you fibs. They want to go home from hospital. Who's at home for you? Oh, yes, my daughter's, she'll come and live with me for the next 3 weeks. Have you asked your daughter yet? No. Make assumptions, and you find out about it when you actually go there. So it means good discovery, listening, understanding, and then good solutions from the information. That's the process that we're doing today. Discovery, we don't use profiling anymore. Profiling is what the police do. We do discovery. Much nicer word. Knowing me. Have you got bucket lists? No? Yeah, of course you have. Must have. Tick them off. Important. Your strengths and family. The obstacles, things that get in the way. And that could be a family, actually. But it could also be technology, infrastructure, and the problems we have to solve. So it's about strength. That is the circle of strength. What abilities do you have? Don't talk about what they can't do. What can they do? What's your interests? Which group are the most lonely in the country? Which age group are the most lonely? This was published in The Guardian yesterday. Sorry? No, and that was the surprise. Everyone thought, oh, older people are going to be lonely. No. 18 to 25. That's the group. Why? Yeah, it is mobile phones and things like this, but interests. You need interest to relieve the loneliness. Interest in people, interest in doing things, belonging to societies, to church or wherever it is. And if someone told you, my interest is my phone. Why? Because I spend 8 hours a day on it. That's going to leave them lonely and often rude as well. So interests matter. Family, of course you want family. Your values, you know, what is acceptable to you, what you like, what you don't like, and those goals and ambitions, things you want to do, bucket list, places you want to go to. So that's important for strengths. And that means we should be asking a different set of questions, such as, how do you spend your time? And we don't really know how people spend their time. It used to be assumed people spent their time watching TV. And what we know of the 18 to 25-year-olds, they don't anymore. They don't even have a license, so they stream things, they're on their phones. And it varies also. So there's no point having this routine. It varies day, evening, weekends, holidays, whatever. And what would you prefer to do? Yeah, I'd like to go abroad on fulfill my bucket list. And then there's lots of other possibilities to improve your life. And what gets in the way? Back to the hurdles and handicaps. And they often are lack of skills. So in the case of someone with learning disability, you teach them new skills. Okay, so that's the background. So imagine you're going to open a new form of social media. Okay, you've fed up with Facebook, so you want to collect this information. The starting point should be social capital. Who's close to you? Yeah, this is all very obvious sort of stuff. But when it comes to the crunch, if you're going away on holiday, who's going to feed the cats? Who'll take your dog for a walk if you're unwell? Which of them is it going to be? And if they can't answer these questions, and they've got 4 of them there, you know, there's a gap there. So they've got a weak social network. That's a particularly difficult one. If they're in hospital, who will bring them a change of night clothes? Circles of support is another way of looking at this. Inner circle of intimacy. How many people on average are in someone's circle of intimacy? They may have a family of 12, but don't tell me they're close to every single one of them. These are the people you love, the people you're prepared to share secrets with, and you're going to be safe with them. How many? What's the average? 1 or 2. Well, the actual, this was a result of a big research study. 4.1 was the average. So this takes the people who have maybe only 2 up to people who have perhaps 8. But the conclusion was that you can't have more than 6 genuine friends. The rest are in the next layer, which you think they're. This is the friendship layer. The people you might go on holiday with, you meet in the pub for a beer or go for a coffee with. They're friends who come and go. Beyond that, these are people you work with. So each of you may be in each other's circle of participation. But you'll come and go. You'll go to other jobs. You'll move house. And it won't devastate you. People moving out and into number 3 do not really have a big impact. And number 4 is people you pay. You do not pay friends for being your friend. And this is a mistake some older people or people make about older people who have a service. They think their carers are their friends. They're not. They can be changed. In fact, if you're an older person, you might get a different carer every single day of the week, each time in the day. So they're being paid for it. But now move to the other older person, the ones we believe are lonely. They could be lonely because there's nobody down here anymore. They've outlived their family. Their friends start popping off. And they start thinking, these are my friends. I'm okay, I've got friends. And then you turn up at the funerals. During COVID, we were restricted to 30 mourners, only 6 before that. What's the average number of mourners for someone over 85 today? I don't know the answer, but I've seen several where there's under a dozen, and it seems to be the way that it is. It's where the funeral director tells you, do you want us to supply the bearers because there aren't family members and friends available to do it? We're seeing more and more of this. Unfortunately, these are the people who come to social services for a service because they generally are lonely, unconnected. So part of the way of solving this, we have to look at their lives. I call them life threads. These are the little bits that you can catch onto. In a conversation, these are the things you might talk about. You find out their favourite films, their favourite food, because otherwise it's conversation that everyone should be able to answer. The home, where do you live? Well, is this a strength? Well, it is, because one of the questions you ask after this is, do you like it there? And if they like it, irrespective of the damp or whatever. That's a strength. But in practice, what you find very often is that they don't like it there. So, you know, they've got nothing that forces them to stay there. And that matters a lot, because when you ask people what they want, I want to stay put. Very common. That means they like it. Is it easy to maintain? The 3-story house for someone whose knees have gone or who needs new hips, not suitable. Perhaps it should be adapted. So we really have to assess the house as well as the person. And it needs to be done systematically, starting off these days with the facilities, the utilities, and now it's about Wi-Fi. Do they have it or not? Is there a good signal everywhere? Do they have all the main services already? The bathroom, lots of things to look at. So when you're doing a home assessment, you walk into a bathroom, and an OT would do this. You see what's there, and you suddenly realise these are indicators of some vulnerability. Yes, so the kitchen, again, you look at what's there. A chip pan. Well, they used to like it. They used to have lard in their kitchen fires. Ooh. Do they know where the stopcock is if there's a flood? Can you get to it? Simple questions to ask. In fact, you can do it the same for any room, and all of a sudden you understand that property and you know what should be done in there, inside and outside, for security and peace of mind. And then, do they use technology? Again, you just walk into the house, have a look around. If you see the old analog phone, well, that tells you something. If you see an old Nokia, that's telling you something. At least they got one. It's not a smartphone. Isn't that a DVD player? Anyone still got one? Do they still sell them? Do they? I thought you downloaded things these days. Anyway, that's a changing world. 3 questions. Do they have the interface devices needed? Do they have internet access at home? And are they confident to use it? You need to know about that. And then, of course, there's the horrible issue and concern about all those things they may or may not have. We have to know about them, because that's probably why they came to you in the first place. But it mustn't dominate the assessment. They combine. Nobody has only one of these issues. They've all got several. They may not admit them. You may deduce the others. So the process: find the strengths, realize their ambitions, what they are, what they will move towards, see what's stopping them, the obstacles that lie in their way. That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all the way up from physiological right through to the self-actualization. These are things that make them good in themselves, and that gives you the solution. So those are the steps we're talking about today. We need to look at needs, vulnerabilities. Any of you who are an OT know all about this. And if you can't do, is it 2 in Bromley? How many do you need to be eligible for a care package? 2. 2 or 3, yeah. Okay. Which ones are they going to be? Most likely.
Personal care is
Well, yeah, that covers them all, really, doesn't it, in a way? But one thing that's for sure, if you can't walk, how the heck do you bathe? You know, so these things tend to be interrelated anyway. So people come to you probably too late, because there's a lot of this they can't do. They've tried for so long, the family perhaps have helped, but they've reached a point where they can't. So when we're looking at the needs, this is maybe the priority. And then there's this set of activities called the instrumental activities. Now, are these more complex or simpler than the dressing and washing and the activities of daily living? Simpler. Yep, everyone thinks these are simpler. Except me. They're not. They're complex because they require lots of reasoning. Oh, you need the other bits as well. You know, there's no point saying, oh, going shopping. If you can't walk, that's going to be a problem. But you need, there's combinations of skills needed to do this. Home maintenance, what does that really mean? Does it mean cleaning the windows? Well, not necessarily. First thing is realizing that they need cleaning, because you can organize somebody to come and clean them for you. Cooking, a really complicated one. They're not needed every day. Shopping, you don't need to go shopping every day. Some people like to go every day, not needed every day. Whereas home care, where someone needs to come every morning, 8 o'clock, to get you out of bed and dressed, it doesn't matter. The clock isn't against this so much. It could be for which one? Well, yes, medication management. There is a clock there, but it's not the same as I'm going to be stuck in bed until someone comes to help me out. So they're needed also, but in terms of the priorities, those lie to the right and therefore perhaps not so important. And then there's another layer, which I call the fun layer, quality of life, because, okay, let's suppose you can do that. If you don't actually have anything on the right, then that's where you get lonely, bored, life isn't worth living. And yet, when it comes to perceived need, we don't really consider the one on the right, and we should do. Holistically, we're looking at everything someone needs, so we need to understand and do something about it. So the groups we're talking about today, well, I've just flashed those up. I was going to draw them in terms of the actual numbers, make the blob the size of the numbers. So for example, people with a sensory loss, how many are we talking about? How many people have a hearing or a sight deficit in the UK? Guess? Lots, millions, absolutely. There are 1 million registered blind. Hearing, people don't own up to it, there's even more. But the two big ones as far as social care is concerned, of course, are the frail elderly and people with a cognitive impairment. So we'll come back to that in a moment, and recognising that there are people with learning disabilities, again, that's over 1 million. Mental health, even because it comes and goes, there's even more of them. So things that can challenge people. If you have a long-term condition, a chronic disease, this is Scottish data, but what it shows is that as you get older, you have more and more of these conditions. So we're going to have more of these needs. Frailty, it's not a particular condition, it's a syndrome, and it's associated with lots of different things. Shrinking, people really do. I have lost 1 inch in height in the last 20 years. It's in your knees, it happens. Actually, the condition used to be only recognised in old ladies. It was called granny growing downwards. And it's true, they lose height, it happens, and it's one of the symptoms. Low physical activity, spend all day in a chair. They don't get up and exercise, and consequently, they're very slow when they do get up. Other features, their strength. How do you measure the strength of an old person or a young person? What's the standard test? Simple one.
Squeezing the hand.
It is. It's hand strength. So, you should all have them. Go with you. Try this out. And what you'll find is a big difference between left and right. Always. Don't need to ask them which hand you write with. You'll soon spot it if you do a hand test. Exhaustion. Go up the stairs, they're exhausted. Go through to the kitchen, exhausted, have to sit down. So what would the needs be of someone who's frail? Well, there's lots of them. Security, they won't answer the door, so they might leave the door on the latch so anyone can get in. So this is a number of needs. So what I'm getting at is for every condition, syndrome, there are associated set of needs. So on the same theme as this, mental health, lots of different ones. I won't go through them all. Lots of different ones which tend to affect people for a relatively short period of time. And then, of course, there's the really big one, which is dementia, which affects more older people and, unfortunately, many younger people, especially those who happen to be in rock bands in the 1960s. Now, I don't know whether it's the music, whether it's the psychedelic drugs or whatever else, but there's an awful lot of people presenting younger now as well. And all of us know someone or have a relative of someone who has dementia. What does dementia really mean? Well, let's have a look at some of the issues. These are the mild ones. They're not dangerous. They're annoying, irritating. Temporal disorientation, they don't know what time it is. They forget things. That's really frustrating, isn't it, when you have a relative who keeps asking you the same question. What time is it? When are we going there? What are we doing? Then there are difficult ones. Fear of water means they're unlikely to want to wash. They're always scared, almost neurotically. They don't think they have a problem. They'll refuse help, even though it's what they might need. And then there's the really dangerous things. Dressing inappropriately, it means they go out at night, typically in their night clothes, in the rain, in the cold. They won't take their medication appropriately. They won't eat. Pica. Anyone know what pica means?
Where you have strange compulsions to eat
Yes,
non-edible.
it's eating non-edible foods. So which is the most popular? Popular is the wrong word, but it's the one that affects most people who have pica. What do they eat? Oh, I've tasted some biscuits that are pretty inedible, but that's not generally what we want. Plastics? No, plastics are fine because you don't chew them and they go, don't. They will take clothing, tissue, paper generally. The one that causes the biggest problem is cardboard, because you can chew it and you can swallow it and it doesn't do you any good. So these are the sorts of things, unfortunately, when you're assessing someone, these are all needs that you need to address. Over time, I won't spend too much time on this is two curves. These are functions and how they decline over time. And if you have the right support in, you can hold that back by 2 or 3 years. And you can't stop this happening yet. Hopefully there'll be drugs in the future that will prevent it, but that's the benefit if we can put technology in, the right technology at the right time. Learning disability, this is taken from AFG. This is a group in the northwest of England. I've written a couple of books now with one of their directors, Andrew Kendall. These are the needs that they measure people against. Lots of them. It needs almost a separate form of assessment, and it does, and the solutions are different as well. Other groups, people have a stroke, I'm just putting a few examples of the underlying conditions, but what I want to point out is that there are some things there, that's also there, that's also there. And social isolation is there, it's also there, and it's also there, and there. So there are common needs as well. So what we need to do is to create an inventory of all these needs to see which ones apply to which person. So that's what it's all about. And there are secondary issues. And again, it's other things that happen for people who live alone. So, this is like a trigger. Do you live alone? Yes. Then you can be looking out for some of these other things as well. So the summary is that, number one, we need to look at ambitions of people. That has to be where it starts. Look at the barriers and then look at those deficits. So there's a list of the possible desires. Everyone's different, and there may be others that I haven't thought of. The barriers, well, they're mainly the ecosystem or the structure. If they've got no money, that's always a barrier, but that's where the council has to step in. And then the deficit needs lots of them. In fact, the reality is, if we sat down and tried to generate a list of ambitions, we would struggle to get more than 20 or 30. The barriers, again, it's only a dozen or so, but for those deficit needs, hundreds of them. So we can't possibly know them all, but we can try and group them if we're really clever.